There it is.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first order would then be to,
Open to public comment if there are members of the public present. I see that Stephen Singer is here. Is there anyone else?
Stephen, would you like to make any comments?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay,
Okay. Could I just take this opportunity to make a reminder that should you want to make a presentation to the committee, Stephen, you'd need to be put on the agenda. So you just need to contact me before the agenda needs to be posted. Okay?
Sounds good, thank you.
Okay. I believe the next thing should be the approval of the minutes from the May 11th meeting.
I would like to specifically amend the meeting minutes. I had put in a placeholder in paragraph 1 saying that you could click on the link to see the recorded version of the minutes, and obviously that did not happen. So I would like to strike that second sentence that says that you can follow the link here.
Okay. Do we need to vote on that? No.
Basically, yeah, you can.
Okay.
So unless there's other corrections.
I have a comment. How do we handle the fact that we state that the next meeting would be held on June 8th, but that it was canceled, rescheduled, no
That's
quorum?
Relevant to that was sort of the meeting, that was the minutes of that meeting.
So do we add that?
Historically, I have never seen that in other minutes. I could.
Why would we change what happened? At the
Right.
time, we thought the meeting was going to be on June 8th. That's still accurate. That should be in the minutes. That's not an inaccuracy.
Yeah, that's
So
what
would
it's
that be stated anywhere else?
It will be stated in this.
Today's minutes?
Yeah,
Okay. So do I need to do anything else too?
no.
Okay.
I move that we accept the minutes as amended.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Roll call
All in
vote.
favor?
Roll call.
Roll call. Yes, I know. Sue
Aye.
Loveland,
Aye.
myself, aye. George Pavino,
Aye.
Joe Baker,
Aye.
Richard Simon,
Yes.
Mary Reardon Johnson. Do we need the sound up?
She's muted right now.
Thank you. And Will Rubenstein.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Like a pirate.
All in favor? Do we have to do
No,
that?
we just did that. You just did
Oh,
that. Okay.
Good grief. Get so nervous with this. All right. The next item is election of officers, which I understand has to be done following the most recent town meeting. Is that correct?
Even though at the May 11th meeting, we did elect officers at that point because of Will's transfer to his many new roles. We are required by the Yarmouth handbook to elect a slate of officers for the upcoming fiscal year at the first meeting following the annual town meeting, which occurred in the spring. So, and this is tradition also for like the Board of Selectmen just reorganized. So it's just it's a formality at this point.
Right.
I would like to nominate Linda Callahan to continue to serve as chairperson.
Second?
Second.
Good.
Then
Yeah.
all in favor? Do we
No,
have to?
any other nominations? You have to
Is there a whole slate?
you can we could do the whole slate,
I propose that we do the whole slate.
right? That we nominate Linda Callahan for chairperson, Mary Reardon Johnson for vice chairperson, Richard Simon for secretary.
Second,
Okay.
Roll call.
Now you can do roll call.
Sue Loveland,
Aye.
do I vote?
Yes.
Yes. Linda Callahan, yes. George Pavino,
Yes.
Joe Baker,
Yes.
Richard Simon,
Yes.
Mary Reardon Johnson,
Yes.
and Will Rubenstein.
Aye.
Okay.
And thank you, Mary, for that excellent idea.
So the next thing on the agenda is any update information on the Land Distribution Committee from Mary or Will?
I'm not aware that there was a meeting.
Okay,
Well, I can give an update from the first in-person planning board meeting that I have attended in my whole life. And also as a member of the planning board in my whole life was, yes?
Well, I just wanted to clarify that I was referring specifically to the land
I
disposition.
know you were.
Okay.
But at that meeting, I was presented with a very colorful map, which I will have to change my background to show you. Hold on. Yay. A very colorful map. This map was presented to me by our town planner, Ms. Kathy Williams. We had about a 10-minute conversation about this map, and she basically said, "You are barking up the wrong tree if you're trying to use that spreadsheet from 1987. And I said, "Well, that's good, because we'd like to stop barking up the wrong tree. We want to bark up the right tree." And I need to somehow get some copies to this group of this map. But this basically says Town of Yarmouth Public Lands. I don't know if you can see that. See that? And then it's color coded. And it's color coded from municipal and rec, school, library, water, conservation, blah, blah, blah. And I basically said to her, if we're looking that they wanted to, she basically said, "Were you trying to redo something on this current site of either one of the two current libraries?" And I said, "Probably not." And then she said, "Well, what about one new location?" I said, "Probably yes." So we started narrowing it down, to like the center of Yarmouth, which again, I'm sorry that we're not in person, but she definitely pointed out that there are a few parcels that are possible, including the land that is owned, the ones that the land she said that was the most, I won't say most possible, but that had some possibility was the Yarmouth Housing Authority land that is at the corner that we know, next to the
Yes.
senior center across from the dump. There was some confusion about how to go about acquiring said land, but at least I would say this also has the maps, the map numbers, from the town,
Yes.
the tax maps. So long story short, I believe, Madam Chair, she would absolutely be open to some sort of follow-up meeting with you and or Richard and or maybe Mary. I don't have to be there, to talk a little more in detail about this map, about which parcels are possible, and then at least point us in the right direction, whether it's Mary Wagon or whomever is of staff to the Land Disposition Committee, to then go to that person and say, "Well, how do we get this?" Right? I'm using very professional terms.
yes,
Okay.
Will,
So how am I doing so far? Go ahead.
great.
I have a question.
Sure.
How large is that document? Is it 11 by 17 or 8.5? by
Yes, it's 11 by, let me look here. Yep, 11 by 17. And she sort of presented it to me because I had emailed her a little bit, but since we were in person, she printed it out and gave it to me at the planning board meeting. So my question is, Jane, do you have access to this fine thing?
I don't believe that I do.
I
I
mean-
could get a copy from Kathy and she could probably even make me multiple copies.
That's what I think we should do because it's all beautifully color coded and everything.
I mean, I can make the copies here 11 by 17 in color, but you'd have to pay me $1.
Well, okay, wait, but stop. Get the electronic copy, then we can do whatever the hell we want with it.
Oh, the electronic copy?
Thank you.
Richard, you're so electronic.
I would say before and as part of that, it's hard to see because where they put the numbers for the tax maps,
Oh, it's very hard to read, yeah.
it's like they couldn't make it any harder. But from what I can tell, it's map 80. I'll have to look at it again. But anyway, as a general sort of update, it feels like Kathy is going to be helpful and wants to be helpful, and is also, as you can imagine, pragmatically speaking, basically saying this is not going to be easy, but it is possible.
So next step, Will, is for some of us to meet with Kathy and or Mary.
Yes, and she also made one other suggestion, Mary. Thanks for making me summarize that. That's a good strategy. Is she also thought, and maybe I saw it on the agenda, so it's already happening, that some of us make a presentation to the new select board since there's been so much turnover.
That's already scheduled.
Right. So I think what she's basically saying is, if you come at it from her side and the land disposition committee side, but you also have to come at it from the select board side, or else, so those two
Yes.
things come into the middle. So
Yes,
we're all starting to shimmy.
yes, Mary. Mary.
Jane, have you had an opportunity to speak with Mary? I mean, it would seem to me that it would make sense prior to any citizens getting involved, that two department people have a conversation.
The issue is going to be timing here because Jane is leaving today and will not be back until the 12th.
That being said, it's the timing on when we're ready to invest in a town property. And up until this point, it has been a very long-term focus. The last time we asked for available town lots was 2016. And we were sent to the assessor's office, I believe, not planning.
Well,
So I can talk to her.
Can I ask a question? I thought at one point it was suggested that, Jane, that you let somebody on the land disposition committee understand that you were interested in being notified if anything became available, or whatever their process is. Mary, is that correct?
well, I'm referring to that as well as, I mean, I don't know how it works within the town. If I were an employee, I would want to hear from one of my colleagues before I heard it from someone else, is my point. And let me also say that I'm on the housing committee with Mary, and I'm happy to have a conversation with her, but I don't want to step on any relationship you might have, Jane.
There hasn't been this discussion yet. And
I mean, basically what we're saying, what I'm hearing, Will, is that the suggestion is that we somehow get their piece of land.
Well, I think what she's saying is, if you're looking for a piece of land in the center of town,
Right, that's it.
that seems to
This
be
is
the
it.
one that could be a
Right.
swappable piece, but then you get into the state because it's the state housing authority.
Right.
So there's
Well-
extra layers, but yes, essentially.
That's the key for me. I just want to be above board and let Mary know what we're trying to do. And then the question is, how do we get a piece of land to swap? And she might have a piece of land that she would love to swap. So
Can I ask if the Matakis property has ever been involved in this conversation?
So if you're asking me, Linda, we talked about it when she was showing me this map.
Yes,
I definitely brought it up, but I brought it up in the context of, I don't believe that that's a site that we would be interested in.
Right.
But what I don't know is what the disposition of that land's going to be and whether it becomes swappable.
right.
Right? If that's what you're asking.
Well, that's part of it, and because I at some point saw that Eric Tolley's name was connected with the committee. I don't know if that's current. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. At this point, I know there's no members of the committee. So
You mean the
who do we?
Matakis Reuse Committee?
Yes, that one. I'm sorry. Yes. And
So
I don't
we'll-
know what the process is, who you ask to find that out.
Well, Susan had raised her hand. I feel terrible because I
Go ahead.
That's okay. I just wanted to ask, I am not unhappy with what I've heard, but I'm just wondering what other places you talked about, or did you talk about? others.
I believe
Is
the only other,
the only one that's in the center. So is this the only one we can consider? Not
Well-
that I would be thrilled to have it right there, but,
I think the only other piece that came up was the piece that's on the, by the Comcast. I can't remember the name of that street.
yes.
But, to me, that just feels like not great.
Richard?
But that was the only other, besides Mattakese, that was the only other area that was discussed. That's a good question, Susan. I should have mentioned
Okay.
it before.
Richard?
Yeah, so again, I would put this also in a larger context, that any site, and I would hope that we would identify multiple potential sites because there's going to be issues with every one of them. And you may recall that there was a site evaluation matrix that we would fill out. And so rather than identifying just one preferred site, and it may be the preferred site, you would actually want to show due diligence by identifying multiple sites and then laying out the pros and cons of each one. And one of the pros or one of the cons of the housing one might be the complexity of getting the regulatory approvals.
Right.
So I think it's what I would hope we could do again is get this conversation going so that we can basically get that list, start filling in that matrix, and that will help inform, I think, the collective decision as well as the communications with the rest of the stakeholders.
Could I make one other quick
Good,
point?
George.
Go ahead, George.
George?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there was any conversation about what they're gonna use the Mattakese property for, or that nobody knows that.
Yeah, that was my point too.
It's the George, I would call it the booga 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 issue that nobody seems to want to talk about.
Right.
It's like, hello, people. It's a kind of a big deal, but nobody has the select board has taken no action, as far as I can tell, to actually form, much less have a committee meet to talk about it. It's unclear who's going to be on this committee and what, constituencies are going to be represented. So it's a big mystery. It is the 8,000-pound gorilla, not the 800-pound gorilla.
Yeah, for sure.
Linda, the one other thing I want to mention is on my work on the school building committee before the intermediate school was built, the very first thing you have to do is basically on the matrix, Richard, right, is to eliminate the current locations, right? Like that's got to be
Yes.
on there, because as soon as I started talking about it, Kathy was like, well, why can't you just do it at West Yarmouth?
Yes.
Now, again, there's pros and cons, but her quick response is, well, there's plenty of room there. So, I
Right.
would hope that would also be considered, because
So it seems as though both south and west have to be be addressed by that
I
matrix, in
definitely-
addition to
100%.
that, in addition to the one by the senior center. And then we would have to look at this map and see if there are others that seem to fall into possible sites. But my question is, we can do that, but then who do we talk to next? What should be our timeline as to addressing people with the town to make any progress? Does anyone know that?
I think it's two-pronged. I think one is having a continuing conversation with Kathy Williams, and she's already
Okay.
started one with this committee
Yes.
through me. And the second one is through the select board. That's my guess. And also a third one is through the land disposition committee, somehow getting on their radar. But that's just my quick take.
So basically, we have said that, so people have offered to make those connections. And that's what we need to follow through on in the next, let's arbitrarily say in the next month or 2 months. Would that seem to be a path of action that we should take? Okay,
Can I ask a question?
please, Jane.
I'm just anticipating concern in the community if this type of action is getting taken by this group. Have we had enough community input, or where does community input fit into this timeline?
Well, how can you have community input if you don't have any information to give them?
So we're doing information gathering.
That's what I would say.
Okay.
As part of our plan to bring this information to the community. Richard, you were raising your hand?
No, I was just.
Shaking your head.
Mary had raised her hand. I was just sort of nodding affirmative.
Except
Mary? Mary?
Isn't it the standing recommendation? It's my understanding that the standing recommendation of this committee is to build one new library in a centralized location. And is that still the case?
To my knowledge, it is.
Okay, so that's the case, and unless we change that, and we've been, that's a public recommendation. That's our
Correct.
official. So until we come up with some specific location or specifics, I don't know that anything has changed.
Okay.
But let
Does
me
that
just,
answer your question, Jane?
It does, but it doesn't reduce any of my concern.
but, and every time you turn around, no matter who you talk to, even Kathy evidently, the question really is, why aren't you doing two?
Because it's exactly what the question was with the schools. It was exactly what the two communities said. What do you mean you got to build a new building? What's wrong with the old ones? And so that is going to be the initial objection right out of the chute. And
Mhm.
until you can educate people to understand that the cost of renovating X and Y is equal to building a brand new one, or and ba 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 ba,
Actually,
then you just
more.
got to keep ramming in. You just got to batter ram people. That's how we got the school built. I don't know how else to say it.
And every assessment report that we looked at for 40 years and the current one comes up with the same recommendation. So we have documentation to that effect, that the most cost-effective way of doing it. And it's a question of how we present that to the public, how we make it available to the public. It almost seems like at some point, all of those documents need to be available, perhaps on the library website. I'm not sure the method that's appropriate as far as open meeting law. I don't really know what we can do. But it
That's
seems
why
as though whatever we have should be in a format that the public can access it and look at it if they have any questions.
I
Okay.
thought we had all of that.
I'm sorry, Mary, I didn't hear you.
Well, I thought we have all of that.
We do, but do we have it accessible to the public easily?
And maybe
Easily
a
accessible.
good, and maybe a good time to republicize it is after the presentation to the selectmen.
Yes. And we would have to say what is there and what we will be in the process of putting up if everything isn't there.
If the select board was in this meeting right now, all 5 of them, and you asked them, what is our committee's position, right, Mary, as you had just asked? Do you think they would even know?
It's not our position. It was a 3-year.
No, but I'm just saying in terms of what our desire is. Let me put it that way.
Our recommendation.
Recommendation.
Right. Do you think that all 5 of them would know?
No,
Okay. So, I think that's a really good place to start.
I agree.
That
And
is
that's why it
something,
has to come from both sides. Sorry, Linda.
I was just going to say, that is something that is specifically mentioned in the text of the presentation to the Board of Selectmen. And it's mentioned several times. So from that point of view, it is going to be brought to their attention on July 13th. So if July 13th is the first time that we're theoretically making our presentation to the public, in addition to the board, the basics will be there. If we then want to say at that same time, if anybody has questions on how we came to this recommendation, they have access to the documents that we've studied. And we'd have to be able to say to them, this is how you get access. Does that make sense to people?
Mhm.
I've usually seen that when it's at the stage that you have a building committee. That's where I've seen that type of information up online on library websites. It's when you start your campaign for fundraising and you are, gearing up for the grant round.
Well, then how do you bring this information to the public? If they have a question. George?
Is a part of the presentation on the 13th going to talk about the fact that the renovation of these various buildings is going to cost us more than building a new one? If this is going to be our first public viewing of why we're doing what we're doing, somehow they have to understand that it's going to cost more to renovate and knock down Matakey's or build next to West than building a new one. Otherwise,
As
why can't you do
Sorry.
this?
as I understand it, that was brought out in our, as I remember it anyway, that was brought out in our study committee presentation. This one is a much shorter version of what has been happening, bringing the board up to date. It's not a full presentation on all aspects
Okay,
of
okay.
This
the
is
thing.
not the
Jane?
first public
Jane?
presentation.
The study that Johnson Roberts did, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it only talked about renovating the existing library structures. George is talking about renovating other old.
Other,
buildings in town,
correct.
And that's a different story, but it's
You're
the
right.
same answer.
You're right. Mary?
Again, this is not the first public presentation. This
Right.
is not the first presentation to the selectmen. This is updating the current selectmen. And possibly it's time to update the library board and I don't know. Who else needs to be reminded that this work has been done and we're working towards the recommendation.
I'm just going to remind people that further down on the agenda, we were going to be discussing the Board of Selectmen presentation. So we're kind of addressing it out of order. Is that appropriate? Richard?
It's not a problem. You can, again, the secretary is really adept at sort of modifying the outline.
Well, it just seems like we've got our juices flowing. I would rather not stop things if we can come to some kind of a process.
Yeah, you're good.
So do we think that we should go back to the things that we talked about, that we should pursue first in talking with the people in the town to get some kind of, how else can we look at sites, possible sites, without knowing which ones to look at? Richard?
So there's remembering that there is multiple agendas at this particular session. This is an update for the Board of Selectmen to really sort of, in my mind, sort of address a couple of key things. One is where we are with the library, particularly the great job that they did throughout this pandemic. The fact that this did change some of the way that we operated, and it also really forced us to see the inadequacies, the additional inadequacies of the facilities that we do have. We were unable to provide the level of service probably that we would have liked to have been able to provide. So that sort of sets the stage. And then the next stage is we have our new, fortunately the state has, whatever it is, the Library Planning Committee board has come up with their little book here, where I'm looking for my book. So we hold up the book.
Library space.
Here's
Yes.
our planning thing. And we basically make the reference that this is going to give us additional inputs and specifically information related to pandemic design consideration. And it also makes the point that this particular book has a chart in it that shows how big library facilities are supposed to be. And if you'd like me to, I could sort of quickly share a screen here that shows what that would look like. I don't know if everybody can see this.
Yes.
Yes,
So this is literally a page from the manual. And the tan line shows, on one side, the vertical axis is the size of buildings. The horizontal axis is the population. The tan line that runs through the middle of the chart here shows the range of sizes of libraries today relative to population. And the average overall is a white line that runs through the middle of that tan line, and it's called, and that's sort of the current norm, the old norm. The interesting part about this manual is it says that the new norm, the dotted line above the current library size, is significantly higher. And some of that is due to legacy issues, meaning that library construction tends to lag population growth. And so you're always sort of running behind the 8 ball. So we now know that the new norm is that dotted line. That's the average or median. And then the question is, so where does Yarmouth line up today? And so I overlaid here sort of 2 parts of the chart. One side shows where we are today. So it's Yarmouth Port on the bottom, West Yarmouth and South Yarmouth libraries are combined on the bottom. And what you'll see is the total of those 3 is below the level that is sort of the normal range for state libraries. And if you look at the other side, which is this new purple line, so you combine the red and the blue and you get a purple, that's where we need to be. And that's right in line with the state guidelines. The average for the state guidelines, not the top of the line, just the average. So to me, this reinforces the message that the hard work that the study committee did was right on. Any questions on that? Is that a graphic that
Pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive.
You like that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do.
Are you going to show it?
Yes.
That's great. That's great.
So what we're doing there is we're reinforcing the message that this is not something out of the ordinary. It is something that is actually quite in line with the library standards that were recently published. Okay?
Thank you.
I have a couple extra copies of that book if anybody wants to look through it.
I also sent everybody links to the website where you can find the book. The other thing that book also had is something called the libraries. They said that to refer to the Edgartown Library Building Program as the model that you should follow. It's half the size of the library building program that was put together in 2018. So Jane and I and Linda have been collaborating on skinning ours down to match what the Edgartown sample is. And I would perhaps share a new screen with you. So sorry for the color coding, but if you look at the manual that I just referenced, they break out the service areas, or they break it out into 3 types of services. And I'm going to scroll down here just a little bit. What they call the service zones, which is where you provide public services. The material zones, where you store things, books, DVDs, and provide seating. And then staff zones, the behind the scenes stuff that makes it work. And so what I've presented here is to show how, so a couple of things. So the Edgartown outline is the side on the left. I remapped, and on the right here is what we had previously in the library building program. And what you'll see is, if you look, for example, they have one category called self-service. We had 4. So guess what we're going to do? Mush them together. We had 5 different write-ups for administrative offices. They have 1. So guess what? Mush them together. And you can sort of see this lays out and I've organized these in the same sort of categories. Now, some of the coding, by the way, that's down the middle here, I put that in because I had two pieces of paper and I had to map Edgartown to Yarmouth, and then I had to make sure that I was sorting them in a sequence. So you'll see in this particular sequence, the service items are listed first, followed by the materials, followed by the staff zone. And so Jane and I were talking about how best to organize it. So these would be this would be the way our current outline of how we would organize it. We've already done the hard work. All I had to do was use my linked spreadsheet to map all of the work that we had done in 2018 to put our current square footage for both west and south into one total here. And then the planned square footage is, again, just the total that we had from our 2018 analysis, which is the 26,000 square feet. The last piece of that is a public health adjustment. We don't know what the pandemic, there are some additional recommendations in the library planning manual, but we don't really have a handle on what that would be. So one of the ways we might want to think about that is there's a unknown public health adjustment factor that we're going to have to sort of factor into the design. So that's the hard work behind the scenes to compress the library planning building program into a shorter, tighter document. Question?
This represents, Richard, both buildings or just south?
Oh,
Both.
so we have about 13,000 usable square feet between the two, of which 9,700 is usable. And you can sort of see again, we're just undersized by a factor of 2.
This is the building program for the proposed new library,
Yes.
Right.
correct?
It's what they tell us is it's the document that you would give to an architect or a designer so that they can take these numbers and design you a building.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a quick one. Richard, on your previous chart with the square footage over the population bandwidth, did I hear you say you had Yarmouthport included in that?
Yes.
All right, on that one, yes.
Right. The assumption that we had in our evaluation was that Yarmouthport would continue to provide its services. It's an independent library and would be an important part of actually providing the overall services to the community. It is not in a so-called slosh zone. It's not as one of the big issues with both west and south is in the event of a major hurricane, those buildings would be potentially inundated by water based on the slosh zone. So the idea of moving to higher ground, but then also relying on Yarmouthport to provide some of the services. Otherwise, you would be looking for closer to a 30,000 square foot facility.
Yeah, no, I understand your explanation. To me, the difference between the two charts is Yarmouthport's included in one, and then the Excel spreadsheet, it's not included.
Right, because it's an independent thing. So we don't, so it doesn't for purposes of this chart or for purposes of the library building committee, you're not proposing to do anything with Yarmouthport as part of that. As a private organization, they wouldn't be eligible probably for state grants anyway.
Okay.
Anything more we want to discuss? I'm sorry, I disappeared. My internet cut out, so I'm back.
I wonder if Joe's question has to do with existing, that column that had the existing dimensions or square footage. Is that what you're saying, Joe, that Yarmouth Port would be included in that column?
Well, yeah, to me, on the Excel spreadsheet about, if we were to put both charts in front of the Board of Selectmen, and it requires a lot of explaining about why Yarmouth Port's included on one and not included on the other.
I don't think we're gonna show them the columnar document. That's for the
Right.
building program document.
Okay,
Yeah, I think that's sort of an important point. The building program is an internal library program. It would be available to the public, and usually at the beginning of it, it would have all of those caveats about what's included and what's not included.
okay, no, that's fine.
Do we want to continue discussing this or move on in the agenda? How,
So let me just sort of process-wise, Jane is leaving until just before we're going to make this presentation. So the current state, Sue and Linda are making the presentation. They are preparing scripts. I will support this by preparing slides that sort of support the script. I'm assuming as soon as we have sort of the next draft of it ready, then we could share it obviously with this committee and others.
and it will go into the packet, as I understand it, for the Board of Selectmen prior
It
to
would
the
go
meeting.
in- Right, it would go into the packet for the Board of Selectmen meeting. That would have to happen the Wednesday before the Tuesday meeting. So it basically has to be ready 6 days before the meeting on the 13th, which is the 7th.
Is that what you found out, Jane? Can't hear you.
Oh, I know, I'm unmuting. I didn't get an answer and I only asked tonight, but my understanding, Richard, is that the deadline is Friday and that Mary Alice does it a little differently than Linda
Okay,
do it in the previous
So
administration.
it gives a little more time.
right.
So
Now,
I
the
have
other-
to have mine done by Friday.
Friday the
Uh,
9th.
No, yeah, we would like it before then because I still have to produce slides.
But you don't have to do slides for me.
It's
Well-
slides, so even if so key talking points typically are very useful. So that so whatever you have, if you pass along to me, sort of, I would want to have at least one placeholder slide for the library boards, which would summarize what you're going to say.
So I can probably send you an outline
Good, thank you.
We thought it
Um,
would be,
because I'm going to go on also.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear all that.
She's gonna be gone also.
Oh, right.
Okay.
I think we were
the-
thinking that this was a single presentation to combine the two because it was a segue into the other. So the slides could be for the entire thing.
You want the slides to be for the entire thing. You don't want to be bumping two things together. The other thing that I was going to recommend that we include in that Board of Selectmen package was the 2-page handout that we did use at town meeting, a couple of town meetings ago. That was very, in 2 pages, it was the whole story.
Right.
So again, this would be a great opportunity for us to include that in the packet, reminder to the selectmen as well as the public.
Can we do this by email or does it,
Yeah, you do this all by email.
that's what I thought. Anything else?
Good job.
The next thing that we were going to talk about was the possibility of including a library in a community center, something that's been mentioned in the visioning surveys. I know, Joe, you wrote a statement, and Mary, you had some comments. How much time do we want to spend discussing that? Joe, do you want to lead us on your statement?
Well, I'm traveling and I don't have my library book memo with me. So,
That's okay.
but
I, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say I made a copy, and I mean, I have it in front of me, so I don't know if that's helpful. But I can just paraphrase it. Basically, you were saying that the Library Planning Committee believed that a new consolidated and centrally located facility can more effectively serve the needs of the town for the next 25 years. And then you did mention ideally adjacent to the current senior center. Then you said multi-use community center will house significantly expanded library facilities. So you included library facilities in the overall plan. You talked about, you were specific as to what it would contain, that it would
Right.
be useful to different groups of people. I'm not sure at this point now if this is something that we would be using unless we hear more
Right.
about the possibility of a community center being followed up. And I'm not sure exactly when that would happen, but maybe it's just that we would be prepared to include ourselves in that discussion. Richard?
So a couple of things that came out of the space, this thing.
I can't hear you very well. Can you speak?
One of the things that came
Thank
out of this book was the pandemic thing. It specifically identified a standard MERV 13 handling, which allows for 2-hour complete flush of any interior space. I believe that it's going to become an issue for the town's facilities in general, schools specifically. And other town, especially things like the senior center, are potentially going to be faced with
Upgrading.
potentially doing some of this work. So
Yeah.
I think we have to be open to the idea that, that this new post-pandemic standard is going to affect a lot of the facilities that provide public services. And if we are asked to partner up with somebody to make that happen, I think we have to be flexible to do that.
Open to the, yes. George?
I think we should be open to it as well.
To me,
The question that I have is whether the Recreation Commission is talking about at this moment a community center. And does anybody know anything about their discussions?
I haven't heard anything.
No.
No. Okay. I mean, I just wouldn't want us and another group moving in two separate directions when in fact we could be doing something together.
Right.
Well, I think as long as we put it in I think especially if we put it in the context of being, having all of the town's facilities up to snuff when it comes to HVAC requirements, then I think that sort of encourages collaboration.
Mary, you had some thoughts on it that you had expressed earlier. Do you want to pursue any of those? It was sort of along these same lines.
Yes. First of all, let me say that I'm not opposed, and we even discussed it when we made the initial recommendation that as we went further down the road, there might be an opportunity to partner with a senior center, a community center, some other group. However, that's down the road. And so my question is, and first of all, I don't think we can arbitrarily add work to ourselves. We've been assigned to the library to look at the library. I'm hopeful there's another group that's also looking at a community center. And when they get to the point that we have of making a recommendation, when they've found a possible site, et cetera, I think it would be great for us to sit down with them. But I, for one, am not looking to add a community center to our agenda at this time.
George?
Jane, do you know if things are combined, does that have any impact on state money?
It does not. It used to be, George, that the consultants would dissuade library organizations from doing that kind of thing, from combining a senior center or a recreation center. I believe that in the past decade, they've come to understand that if that's what the community wants, then they will support that type of a structure.
But only to the effect that it's they only support the library portion in terms of funding.
Correct.
Right.
That's correct, Richard. I mean, one of the concerns that they used to talk about was like division of responsibilities for security and for safety, and that librarians would, have a difficult time getting cooperation from other I don't see that. I mean,
Yes.
modern day.
Okay,
And I mean, some communities are so desperate for upgraded facilities that if that's the way it's going to be, executed, then that's the way it's going to be. There's a town in Massachusetts that got a new library simply because a private company built the town a community center. And one half of it was the library, and that's how they got their library.
Right.
right.
So that once that happened, it turned some thinking around at the state level.
Okay, thank you, Jane.
If only.
Yeah. Anything more? Have we made any decisions from this discussion?
I think I don't think there's a decision to be made at this
Okay.
point.
So we should move on to the next item on the agenda. It was the library reopening process. Jane, do you want to just update us briefly?
Sure. And my update, of course, now is a couple weeks older because the original meeting was right after we were supposed to have opened. It's been a challenging month of June. Let me just tell you that. Every day I hear a handful of patrons pushing back in terms of any restrictions that we've put into place here, despite how many times we communicate the uniqueness of our facilities, the underage population who's not yet vaccinated, the vulnerable population we serve, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd like you all to solve that problem for me while I'm gone on vacation. That would be great. The traffic has been cut way back, I would say. People still enjoy the curbside, but to further complicate it, after the second or third week of our opening, the town administrator insisted that we go back to our full hours of operation, and they're so kooky that, we're back to that 3 to 8 shift at West on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we're open 10 to 8 here Mondays and Wednesdays, and then, so it's a little bonkers, and it's summer and it's hot, and it's busy.
Okay, anybody have any comments, questions for Jane?
I just want to appreciate your work and that of your staff, Jane.
Thank you. And may I just say that for as many complaints as we've had, I'm sure there have been tons of positive interactions as well, but I think it's pretty exhausting what they're going through right now.
Well,
And in the back burner, by the way, not only is it, the library is in the process of getting a semi-permanent gazebo for outdoor story time. And that should be hopefully installed maybe as early as next week.
A shade structure,
The
Yes.
shade structure.
beautiful,
where did that come from?
from the sky.
A generous donor, the South Yarmouth Library Association, found that they could get this $3,000 gazebo for free.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And
Free is
hopefully
good.
there might even be one at West if they are comfortable with it.
It's a brand new structure. It's not like it's a hand-me-down from somebody that just donated it. It's a beautiful brand new structure, and it's going to be what we need. It's going to help the children's outdoor reading programs, musicians performing out there, different programs, book groups, meeting outside. It's wonderful.
And I know you've thanked them.
Just as an aside, I just read a grant. I volunteer for the Cape Cod Community Foundation. And the Hyannis Library has a play space. outside, where they actually put books and toys for parents to interact and learn to play. Play is children's work, to play with children. And I believe they're going to receive a grant. So the Friends of the Library, who I think are incorporated, might consider submitting to the foundation at some point.
That's what the South Yarmouth Library Association acts as a friends group for the South Library, and the West group acts as a friends group for the West Library.
Mary, how big is the grant request?
Their grant request is, I believe, 10,000.
That's decent.
You know what? I don't know. It's I know the grants are a $5,000 to $10,000 range. I think it's possible. I don't know.
Can we, Mary, can we take this offline? 'Cause
That's right.
I'd like to get a copy of said document, but we could.
Oh, I don't think I would have to ask permission for that.
Okay.
I do have some.
I know ethics, but you know, it'd be interesting. to
Richard,
say,
just Google it. You'll find it.
I'll
Okay,
find it. Okay. Thank
Let's
you.
move on. Shall we move on?
Yes.
Let's briefly mention the visioning project, excuse me. Will, do you want to update us on anything? And
The survey is out and it's running until July 31st. And there have been over 450, I think, responses as
wow,
of a week or two ago. Clearly, that sounds like a good number, but you know, it's really not. So,
But it shows a trend that's increasing.
it's
no,
more
no,
than,
no. It's
the
all
first
good.
one.
It just the
Yeah.
more you can encourage people to do it. It's on the front page of the town website. There's a visioning button right at the top. There's links to it there. But that continues
would
to
be
move
a
along.
perfect spot for people on the committee and friends and family that live in the community to go to the library page and perhaps make a statement.
Agreed.
support
And
of-
not that you want to spend time watching old planning board meetings on YouTube. However, you know, there was an attempt to sort of poo-poo the libraries, and I did my best to hold the line. So
I know.
there is an
I-
actual separate section for the library in the visioning
Yes.
survey.
Yes,
Well, we're
And-
delighted to see it. It's wonderful.
well, that's
and-
why I, go ahead.
Right. No, and it actually has, I think, some open-ended sections, right, Linda?
Yes,
So
there's
that
a-
people can express themselves, not just give a scale of
Exactly.
in favor or out of favor.
That's why I was mentioning it. If you know people, and hopefully everybody has taken it. And if you haven't, go to the little comment box and perhaps make a statement to the effect of, you know, your support of a recommendation.
And in general, you know, if you love Yarmouth, this is a thing that's happening, and it does,
Right.
you know, it's important just from a broader perspective, but certainly from the library
Mm-hmm.
uh,
That, true.
needs as well.
True. Anybody have anything else to say about it? No. All right. I think we've talked enough about the presentation before the Board of Selectmen, unless anybody else has another thought that they all of a sudden have.
I just want to say, Linda, I think I need to contact you. I'm assuming if we're going to do this whole thing together, that we should submit it as one document. And so.
It will be two parts of
Right,
one presentation. I mean, I think yours would be done separately and mine would be done separately, but the whole thing would go together in the packet.
Right.
But we can talk about that.
yeah,
Well,
we'll
and
talk
Richard,
about-
Jane?
Richard and I talked about it, and it's just easier to have it as one PowerPoint. So it's going to be
Yes.
called Library Board and Library Planning Committee updates for the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
all right, so then I need to get what I finally get to you, and I need to know when you want that, and you need to know when I'm willing to get it to you.
Sooner the better.
Yesterday.
The sooner the better. I got plans this weekend.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna be away. I don't know what's gonna happen.
Well, again, just sort of, you know, again, I'm, as you know, I'm pretty flexible and pretty, and it's.
I would say we have to just do the best we can in whatever format it can be gotten to Richard for the slides, and then we'll just do what we can for the rest of it.
Madam
I'm on
Chair,
about my fourth revision.
I apologize, but I have to go to another meeting, Madam
Yep.
Chair. Thank you for
Sure.
running an excellent meeting.
Thank you.
I need to leave as well.
Okay,
In
Um,
fact, I
we
think we are at
will-
the end of our agenda.
Yes.
basically, yes. The other things we don't have to discuss, one was just an informational piece. So I think we're all set as far as, what about a future date? It's something that we didn't discuss.
The next probable date would be August 10th and September 14th. I'm gonna just put those out there.
So we're not planning on a meeting for July other than the presentation,
Right.
okay? That sounds wise.
Everybody's traveling. So I'll put that out there in the minutes. And then we can sort of powwow a little bit further.
Can you tell me again which ones you were?
August 10th and September 14th were the two dates that we had talked about. For the second, so going back to the second.
Second Tuesday of the month at
Tuesday of the
4:30.
month.
Okay, so we'll just have to poll everybody to see what would work.
Yep, unless, yes, as long as we have a quorum, we're good.
Okay,
We do need a roll call vote to adjourn.
okay.
I'll stay for that.
George, do you want to start?
Yes,
Are you in favor of adjournment?
I am indeed.
Mary?
Yes,
Or-
please.
Okay. Richard?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Sue? Myself, yes.
we
All
have a
right,
quorum.
so
We're good.
we're all done.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Everyone.
All right.
now.
I do
Safe
need
travels,
to-
Sue.
Sue,
Thank you,
want me to
you
stay
too.
on?
Yes,
Okay.
Do you need me?
yes.
Okay.
Am I stopping the recording though, right?
Yes, you can stop the recording.